The moment Jake told her she'd gotten too fat to turn him on, something inside her snapped, not into anger, but into something far colder, far more dangerous. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just looked at him, lying there naked beside her, his face twisted in that stupid, self-satisfied smirk, and thought, "Oh, you have no idea what you've just done." It wasn't the weight comment that did it. Not really. It was the way he said it, casual, like he was pointing out a stain on her shirt. Like he expected her to nod and promise to fix it. Like he had any right. She'd been driving 90 miles every weekend to see him, eating whatever scraps he had in his sad little grad student kitchen, and now this? 10 pounds. That was all. 10 pounds in 2 years. She still fit into the same jeans. But she didn't argue. That was the thing. She just sat up, pulled her shirt back on, and said, "Cool, thanks for letting me know." And then she went to sleep like nothing had happened. Because she already knew. Men like Jake didn't say things like that unless they were looking for a way out. Unless they'd already found someone else. 3 months later, he called it off. "You don't know enough about science," he said, like that was a real reason. Like she hadn't spent every weekend listening to him ramble about his research, nodding along while he showed off. She laughed right in his face. Bullshit. Try again. And then he did. Meg. 19 years old. His student. The laugh that burst out of her then wasn't rage. It was pure, unfiltered disbelief. Because, really? That was his grand exit? After 3 years, he was trading her in for a teenager who couldn't even spell taxonomy? But the best part? The best part? Meg was bigger than her. A lot bigger. So all that you've gained weight nonsense? Just Jake being a coward. Just him trying to make her do the dirty work so he didn't have to feel guilty. Well. She wasn't going to be the one feeling guilty. She emailed his roommates first. Nice guys. Better friends to her than they ever were to him. George, especially, tall, easygoing, with a dry sense of humor that had made her laugh more times than Jake ever had. The other one, Mark, was quieter, but solid. They both replied within hours. "We knew," George wrote. "We told him to tell you or we would." Mark's email was shorter, "He's an idiot." She smiled. Then she asked if they'd mind if she came by to grab the last of her things. George's response was immediate, "Come Friday. Jake's got a late lab. I'll help you pack." But she wasn't just going to pack. The house smelled like cedar shavings and damp fur when she walked in. Jake's breeding operation, gerbils, mice, a few exotic reptiles, took up half the living room. Tanks lined the walls, heat lamps humming. She'd always liked the animals. They were quiet, uncomplicated. Unlike Jake. George handed her a box. "You okay?" "Better than okay," she said. She made a show of collecting her spare toothbrush, the sweater she'd left there last winter, a pair of earrings. Then, while George pretended not to notice, she pulled out her camera. Click. The endangered desert tortoise Jake wasn't supposed to have. Click. The overcrowded mouse cages, the ones he'd been selling to labs without proper permits. Click. The illegal monitor lizard, basking under a heat lamp right next to the window, visible to anyone walking by. George raised an eyebrow. Taking souvenirs? Something like that. He didn't ask. Just nodded. That night, they went out. Bars, clubs, anywhere Jake's friends might be. George made sure to introduce her loudly, "This is Jake's ex-girlfriend," and she made sure to laugh too loud, lean in too close. By midnight, half the department knew she was there, and the other half would hear about it by morning. They stumbled back to the house drunk, George's arms slung over her shoulders. Jake and Meg were on the couch, watching some bad movie. Meg's eyes went wide when she saw them. "Oops," she whispered, fake giggling. "Didn't know we had an audience." George squeezed her waist. "Who cares?" Jake's face was priceless. She made sure to leave her lipstick smudged on George's collar. The next morning, she dropped the film off at a 1-hour photo place. By afternoon, she had the prints in her hands. By evening, she was on the phone with Fish and Wildlife. "I'd like to report a violation," she said sweetly. And just like that, the first domino fell. The woman from Fish and Wildlife listened carefully as she described the animals, the unregistered tortoise, the illegal lizard, the cramped breeding conditions. She could practically hear the pen scratching notes on the other end of the line. "You said the monitor lizard is visible from outside?" "Clear as day," she said. "Right by the living room window. You can't miss it." A pause. "And you're certain it's a Nile monitor?" "Positive. Jake bragged about it being technically illegal when he first got it. Said no one would ever check." Another pause, longer this time. "We'll look into this. Thank you for your concern." She hung up, smiling. George called 3 days later, breathless with excitement. "They're here. Right now." 2 officers, badges out, going through every tank. She could hear muffled voices in the background, the clatter of cages being moved. "Meg tried to cover for him," George whispered. "Said all the animals were hers. Like they wouldn't check permits." She laughed. "Where's Jake?" "Still at the lab. Meg's panicking, keeps calling his office, but you know how the phones are there. No one's picking up." A door slammed. Someone barked an order. "Shit, gotta go," George hissed. "They're asking for access to his room." The line went dead. She didn't have to wait long for the next update. By the time she got home from work, her answering machine was blinking. George's voice, triumphant. "They took everything. Everything. Even the mice. Left the guppies, though. Jake's gonna lose his mind." She played it twice just to savor it. Then she picked up the phone again. Mary, Jake's advisor's wife, answered on the second ring. "I heard about the breakup," Mary said gently. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart." "Don't be," she said. "Turns out Jake was sleeping with one of his undergrads. Meg. Started before we even broke up." A sharp inhale. "Are you sure?" She forwarded the emails, Jake's own words, confessing everything in writing like the arrogant idiot he was. Mary's voice turned to ice. "I'll handle this." 2 weeks later, Jake's EPA grant was revoked. 3 weeks after that, the university fired him from his TA position. And by the end of the month, he was packing up what was left of his life, no PhD, no funding, no animals, while Meg hovered in the doorway, looking less like a girlfriend and more like someone realizing she'd bet on the wrong horse. George sent her a photo of the empty tanks. "House feels cleaner already," he wrote. She framed it. The letter from the university's Office of Academic Integrity arrived on thick ivory paper, the kind that felt expensive between your fingers. Jake tore it open standing in the kitchen, his hands shaking so badly Meg had to read it over his shoulder out loud. Following investigation, violation of ethical standards, termination of teaching assistantship effective immediately. Meg's voice got smaller with each word. The last line, scholarship revoked pending appeal, came out as barely a whisper. Jake made a sound like a wounded animal. "This can't be happening." Across the room, George casually stirred his coffee. "Should have kept it in your pants, man." Mary's husband, Professor Henderson, called Jake into his office the next day. The room smelled like pipe tobacco and old books, the way it always had, but now the air felt thick with something else, disappointment, maybe. Or disgust. "I can't protect you on this one," Henderson said, not looking up from the paperwork he was signing. The relationship with the student was bad enough, but the illegal animals? The EPA pulling your funding? A sigh. "You're lucky they're not expelling you." Jake's mouth worked silently before finding words. "I can still finish my dissertation." "With what money?" Henderson finally looked up. "Your father called, by the way. Wants to know why he's getting bills from Fish and Wildlife." The chair squeaked as Jake slumped into it. Outside the window, undergraduates laughed on their way to class, carefree. She found out about the marriage from Jake's youngest sister, Lily, over margaritas at a shitty Tex-Mex place. They eloped last month, Lily said, licking salt off the rim of her glass. Mom's furious. Dad won't stop talking about the wasted tuition money. She snorted. Which tuition? Jake's or Meg's? Both. Lily grinned. Guess what Meg's doing now? Waitressing? Accounting. Like a grown-up. They clinked glasses so hard one of them cracked. Years passed. She got her master's degree in science communication, the irony never lost on her, and traveled more than Jake ever had. Tokyo, Nairobi, Reykjavik. Every time she passed a nature center, she'd peek in, half hoping to see a familiar tortoise. George got tenure. Mark moved to Belize to study coral reefs. Mary retired and sent her Christmas cards with handwritten updates about the grandkids. And Jake? Jake bred fancy mice in his garage and taught community college biology courses under a dean who definitely didn't know about the arrest record. Until the day she walked into that lecture hall. Until he said her name like they were old friends. Until she smiled sweetly and asked, "Have we met?" The department chair's fork hovered over her salmon. You're saying this candidate slept with a student? Not just a student, she corrected, dabbing her mouth with the linen napkin. His student. While grading her exams. She let that hang in the air before adding, but hey, that was 20 years ago. People change. The chair exchanged glances with her colleagues. Somewhere across town, Jake's phone was about to ring. Somewhere in a filing cabinet, an old investigation was being reopened. And somewhere in her closet, next to her framed diplomas, that photo of empty tank still sat on the shelf, a reminder that some messes clean themselves up, if you're patient enough to wait. The voicemail notification popped up on Jake's phone just as he was pulling into the community college parking lot. The dean's assistant, her voice artificially bright, Dr. Whitmore would like to reschedule your interview. Please call back at your earliest convenience. Something about the way she said reschedule made his stomach drop. Meg noticed his grip tightening on the steering wheel. What's wrong? Nothing, he lied, shoving the phone into his pocket. But when he stepped into the biology office, the secretary, usually chatty, wouldn't meet his eyes. The department head's door was closed. Behind it, muffled voices rose and fell in urgent conversation. One word cut through clearly, Henderson. His old advisor's name. His knees went weak. She was halfway through airport security when Mary called. They pulled his file, Mary said, the satisfaction in her voice crackling through the phone. Turns out the university kept everything, the student conduct reports, the wildlife violations, even those angry letters his roommates wrote. She balanced the phone against her shoulder as she dumped her keys into the plastic bin. And the arrest? Sealed, not erased. Mary laughed, a sharp, delighted sound. Someone must have really dug for that one. The TSA agent waved her forward. She stepped through the metal detector, smiling. Jake's father's voice roared through the phone loud enough that Meg could hear it from across the kitchen. $30,000 I paid that lawyer to clean up your mess. Do you have any idea what this does to? Jake hung up mid-rant. His hands were shaking again. Meg stared at him, a dish towel clutched in her hands. Is this about that lecturer job? He didn't answer. Just scrolled frantically through his email, searching for the confirmation from HR. It was gone. In its place, we regret to inform you. The department chair's follow-up email arrived while she was somewhere over the Atlantic. Thank you for your discretion, it read. We've decided to go with another candidate. No mention of Jake. No hint of scandal. Just the quiet, efficient sound of a door slamming shut. She ordered a whiskey from the flight attendant and toasted the clouds outside her window. Somewhere below, Jake was probably ranting to Meg about unfair grudges or ancient history. Somewhere in a filing cabinet, his mistakes were still breathing. And somewhere up here, at 30,000 feet, she finally let go of the last shred of anger, not because she forgave him, but because she didn't need to carry it anymore. The past had done its job. Now it was someone else's turn to drown in it. The rejection letter sat on Jake's desk for 3 days before Meg finally threw it out. He watched her do it, the way she hesitated before dropping it in the trash, like part of her wanted to frame it as a monument to his failures. "You should have told me they were calling your old university," she said quietly. Jake's laugh came out jagged. "Would it have mattered?" Meg didn't answer. Just wiped her hands on her jeans and walked away. She ran into Lily at a coffee shop 6 months later. Jake's sister looked exhausted, a toddler clinging to her leg as she fumbled for her wallet. "Divorce papers came last week," Lily said bluntly, bouncing the whimpering child on her hip. Meg got the house. Jake's back in his mom's basement. She handed the barista an extra 20. "Large caramel macchiato, extra shot. And whatever pastry this one wants." The toddler immediately pointed at a frosted cookie. Lily's eyes welled up. "He still doesn't know it was you." She stirred her coffee slowly. Some secrets are more fun kept. The invitation arrived on heavy cardstock. "George and Marisol request the pleasure of your company." Mary had forwarded it with a sticky note, "Guess who's not invited?" The wedding was all soft lights and laughter, George beaming as his daughter scattered flower petals down the aisle. She caught the bouquet, on purpose, and winked at Mark, who nearly spat out his champagne. Later, dancing with Mary under the string lights, she spotted a familiar face across the lawn. Jake's brother. He raised his glass to her in silent tribute. The email from the Science Museum came on a Tuesday. "We'd love you to consult on the new biodiversity exhibit." Her first day on site, she nearly walked straight into a display case. There, behind glass, a desert tortoise dozed under a heat lamp. The placard read, "Confiscated from private collection, 2003. She pressed her fingers to the glass. The tortoise blinked slowly, unimpressed. "Recognize someone?" Mark appeared beside her, grinning. She laughed until her ribs ached. Jake found her LinkedIn profile once. She knew because the people also viewed sidebar suddenly suggested his name for a week straight. She didn't block him. Let him see the speaking engagements, the publications, the photos of her drinking wine with Nobel laureates. Let him notice how often George liked her posts. Most of all, let him wonder. The best revenge wasn't in the doing. It was in the living. And God, was she alive? Jake's finger hovered over the connect button on her LinkedIn profile for 3 days before he finally clicked it. The notification popped up on her phone during a layover in Dubai. "Jake Whitmore wants to join your professional network," and she laughed so hard the businessman next to her spilled his whiskey. She hit ignore. Then ordered another champagne. Meg slid the manila envelope across the diner table 2 years after the divorce. "He's applying to teach high school now." Inside, Jake's freshly printed resume, complete with community college adjunct 2010 to 2023 and a suspicious gap where his PhD should have been. She handed it back. "You know they do background checks, right?" Meg's smile was thin. "I know." The high school principal's call came while she was hiking in Patagonia. Weak signal, broken sentences. "Reference check, listed you as." She waited for the static to clear. "Sorry, say again? Did Jake Whitmore really co-author that NSF grant with you?" The wind howled across the mountaintop. She pictured Jake in his mother's basement, desperately Googling her publications. "No," she said. "He didn't." The line went dead. George texted her a screenshot of Jake's latest Facebook post, a blurry photo of him posing with middle schoolers at a science fair. The caption, "Making a difference one young mind at a time." Message from George, "Check the comments." She zoomed in. There, between generic congratulations, a single reply from an account named Mark_Belize. "Funny, I don't remember reptiles being part of the curriculum." She screenshot it and set it as her lock screen. The tortoise died in 2019. The Nature Center sent her a condolence email. They'd kept her contact info on file as the original whistleblower. She donated enough for a new plaque. in memory of one stubborn survivor. When she visited, there was fresh lettuce by the empty enclosure. A sticky note in familiar handwriting, "He outlived the bastard." Gee. She left her own note beneath it. "Next life, let's be the ones who get away sooner." The email arrived on a rainy Tuesday morning with no subject line, just her name floating ominously in the inbox. The sender address, dwitmore22@yahoo.com, made her coffee cup pause halfway to her lips. "I know what you did." That was it. No threats, no demands, just 5 words typed with the petulant precision of a man who'd spent 20 years simmering in his own resentment. She deleted it without responding, but not before screenshotting it to the group chat with George and Lily. "George, took him long enough. Lily, do not engage. He's been drinking since the high school turned him down." She had no intention of engaging. But when her phone buzzed an hour later with another email, "You ruined my life," something cold and bright uncoiled in her chest. She typed back, "No, Jake. You did that all by yourself." Then she blocked the address. The alumni newsletter arrived 3 months later, boasting glossy photos of the new biology wing. There, in the corner of a fundraising gala photo, Jake, thinner now, his hairline retreating, shaking hands with a dean she knew for a fact had been fired for embezzlement in 2018. The caption identified him as Dr. Whitmore. She forwarded it to the university's alumni office with a single question. "Since when does a master's degree qualify someone as doctor?" The next newsletter had a correction buried on page 6. Meg's daughter found her on Instagram. 18 years old, all sharp elbows and sharper wit, her bio read, "Pre-law." Definitely not following in anyone's footsteps. The DM was polite but pointed. "I know who you are. Mom won't talk about it, but I found the court records. Just wanted to say thanks, your tortoise story was the push I needed to apply to Stanford." She stared at the message for a full minute before responding. "Tell me you're interning with the EPA this summer." The reply came with a grinning emoji. "How'd you guess?" The last time she saw Jake was at a conference in Chicago. She was delivering the keynote, he was lurking near the coffee station, clutching a stolen presenter ribbon someone had clearly abandoned. Their eyes met across the crowded lobby. For one dizzying second, she thought he might actually approach her. Instead, he turned abruptly and knocked over a display of climate change pamphlets. As he scrambled to pick them up, she heard a graduate student whisper, "Isn't that the guy who got caught with the illegal tortoise?" She didn't stay to hear the answer. On the flight home, turbulence rocked the plane violently. As the passenger beside her white-knuckled the armrests, she realized with sudden clarity that she wasn't afraid. Not of crashing, not of Jake, not of anything. Somewhere over Nebraska, she opened a new document and began typing. "Lessons on Karma, a memoir." The first line came easily. "The moment he called me fat, I knew I'd won." The literary agent's office smelled like expensive perfume and desperation. The woman across the desk, Manhattan sharp, with a Prada bag and a practiced smile, tapped her manicured nails against the manuscript. "We love the revenge angle, but memoirs need vulnerability. Show us your pain." She sipped her tepid green tea. "Read chapter 12 again." Jake's brother sent the Facebook screenshot without comment. There, in a since-deleted post, Jake had ranted about bitter exes who can't let go beneath a photo of himself holding a community college Teacher of the Month certificate. The comments were brutal. "Former classmate, weren't you fired for banging a student?" "Random profile, is this the tortoise guy?" "Meg's daughter, congrats on the participation trophy, Dad." She framed it next to George's wedding invitation. The podcast host leaned forward, microphone glinting. "So when did you realize this wasn't just about revenge?" She adjusted her headphones. "When I visited that tortoise for the 15th time and realized I wasn't checking on him anymore. I was checking on me. The studio lights were too bright." She blinked away the glare. "That animal outlived every lie Jake told about himself. That's the real story." Meg showed up unannounced at her book signing. 20 years older, hair streaked with gray, clutching a dog-eared copy. Page 137, Meg said quietly. You changed my size. She didn't need to check. She remembered the line, a girl swimming in borrowed clothes 2 sizes too big, and the careful edit that erased Meg's body from the narrative. You didn't deserve that, she said, signing the title page. Only him. Meg's hand shook as she took the book back. He's sick now. Liver thing. Still tells people it's from stress. The next person in line coughed impatiently. The tortoise exhibit had a new plaque when she visited last summer. Not just the animal's name and lifespan, but the whole story, how it was rescued, why it mattered. A class of 3rd graders pressed against the glass, their teacher reading aloud, sometimes doing the right thing looks like. She slipped out before they reached the end. The parking lot was blistering hot. Her phone buzzed, George, sending a photo of Jake's latest job listing, substitute teacher needed, no experience necessary. She turned the car keys in the ignition. Somewhere, a desert tortoise was still stubbornly alive in someone's memory. Somewhere, a man was still drowning in the consequences of his own choices. And here she was, driving toward whatever came next, the air conditioning blasting, the radio playing something loud and obnoxious and perfect. The weight of it all felt exactly right. The email from the literary agent had a PDF attachment, New York Times bestseller list, with her book title circled in aggressive red digital ink. She stared at it while her morning coffee went cold, the steam curling into nothing. Her phone exploded with notifications. George sent a photo of himself grinning in a bookstore, holding her memoir next to How to Win Friends and Influence People. Lily's text read, Jake's gonna shit himself. But it was the message from Meg's daughter that made her fingers pause over the screen. Just bought 10 copies. Gonna leave them in my dad's favorite dive bars. Jake's response came in the form of a 1-star Amazon review under the username CyprofReal. Self-aggrandizing fanfiction from a jilted ex-girlfriend who never understood academic rigor. It might have stung if not for the avalanche of clapbacks. Verified purchase, says the guy who lost his PhD over a teenager and a lizard. Biologist 123, bro, your academic rigor got you banned from federal grants. Meg's daughter, hi dad. Mom says you're not allowed to review books while drunk anymore. The review was deleted by noon. The invitation to guest lecture at Jake's former university arrived on thick, embossed stationery. The department chair's note was effusive, your work on science communication bridges the gap we've struggled with for decades. She accepted, of course. The lecture hall was packed. Students spilled into the aisles, perched on windowsills, their phones raised to record. She spoke about clarity, about ego, about how the best scientists know that discovery means nothing if you can't make people care. Afterward, a nervous undergrad approached. Do you have advice for women in STEM dealing with predatory mentors? The room went quiet. She handed the girl a signed book. Chapter 7. Jake's obituary popped up in her alumni newsletter 3 years later. Beloved teacher, passionate biologist. No mention of the revoked grants, the fired student, the illegal tortoise. The cause of death was listed vaguely as complications from illness. She clicked the digital guest book. The first entry was from Meg, I hope you found peace. The second was from George, the tortoise outlived you. Just saying. She closed the tab without signing. The Nature Center renamed the reptile wing last spring. The dedication plaque had her name on it, for her tireless advocacy and sharp eye for truth. She ran her fingers over the engraved letters, the metal warm from the afternoon sun. Behind the glass, a new generation of rescued creatures basked under heat lamps. A docent approached, leading a group of schoolchildren. This one's story starts with a brave whistleblower who. She slipped out the emergency exit before they could point her out. The parking lot was empty. The sky was endless. Somewhere, a teenager was reading her book and realizing they didn't have to tolerate being small in someone else's story. Somewhere, a tortoise was still stubbornly alive in the memory of people who'd never even seen it. And here she was, alive, impossibly alive, her shadow stretching long across the asphalt as she walked toward whatever came next. The weight of it all felt like wings. The letter arrived in a yellowed envelope, the kind with brittle edges that crack when opened. Meg's daughter's handwriting had matured since their last correspondence, precise, legal, and utterly devoid of flourish. He left you something. The enclosed key was small, tarnished. A safety deposit box number was etched into its bow. The bank smelled like polished brass and old money. The box contained 3 items. A faded photo of them at the beach, his arms slung carelessly over her shoulders. His tattered graduate notebook with 4 "When you're ready to understand" scrawled on the cover. A check for $18,742.17, the exact sum of his EPA fine, adjusted for inflation. The manager cleared his throat. There's a video message. Would you like to view it privately? The screen flickered to life. Jake, gaunt but sober, looked directly into the camera. You were right about everything except one thing. I did love you. That's why I wanted you to leave. The recording ended abruptly. No signature. No apology. Just 20 years of silence broken by 6 loaded words. She burned the notebook in Mary's backyard fire pit. The graduate-level equations curled into ash with surprising speed. What was his one truth? Mary asked, poking the embers with a stick. That cowards destroy what they cherish most. She watched the last page blacken. It wasn't an apology. It was a confession. The check went to Meg's daughter's environmental law scholarship fund. The photo she kept. At the Nature Center's gala that fall, a newly installed plaque caught the light. All conservation begins with the courage to see things as they truly are. Beneath it, in small print. In memory of Jacob Whitmore's desert tortoise, survivor, teacher, accidental legacy. She touched the metal lightly, then turned toward the cocktail hour. The setting sun painted the reptile wing in golds and ambers, the shadows of leaves dancing across the inscription. Somewhere, a student was reading her book. Somewhere, a tortoise was still teaching its lesson. And here she stood, not triumphant, not vindicated, but finally, blessedly free. The weight of it all had become, at last, just weight. And she could bear it. The call came on a Tuesday morning, just as she was packing for a conference in Lisbon. An unfamiliar voice, crisp and professional. Ms. Whitmore left you the entirety of her father's research collection. Per the terms, you have 30 days to collect it from storage before it's donated to the university archives. She nearly dropped the phone. Meg's dead? A pause. Car accident. 6 weeks ago. The storage unit smelled of mildew and old paper. Boxes upon boxes of Jake's research notes, specimen logs, and, tucked in the back, a single glass terrarium with a familiar heat lamp. Empty. Meg's daughter appeared in the doorway, sunglasses hiding puffy eyes. Mom said you'd know what to do with this garbage. She lifted the terrarium lid. A single, sun-bleached tortoise skewit sat inside. The university archives director nearly hyperventilated when she wheeled in the boxes. This is the complete Whitmore collection? Even the controversial material? She handed over a flash drive. Everything except the animals. Those belong elsewhere. The director didn't notice her slip the tortoise fragment into her pocket. That night, she stood at the edge of a California cliff, the Pacific roaring below. The skewit was lighter than she expected, papery, almost ephemeral. George's voice on speakerphone, "You're really doing this?" "Not everything deserves to be preserved," she said, "and let the wind take it." Meg's daughter texted her a photo the next morning, a newly installed exhibit at the Nature Center. The placard read, "Sometimes the most important scientific act is knowing when to let go." The display case was empty. She booked a flight to Lisbon. Somewhere, a tortoise was finally free. Somewhere, a student was learning to be brave. And here she was, still traveling, still teaching, still becoming. The weight was gone. The lightness remained. The customs officer in Lisbon eyed the empty terrarium in her carry-on with suspicion. Purpose of this item? She ran a finger along the glass where Jake had once scribbled measurement markings in permanent ink. Archaeology. The conference hotel had a rooftop bar overlooking the Tagus River. Halfway through her second martini, a woman in a navy blazer slid into the adjacent seat, late 50s, sharp-eyed, the unmistakable aura of academia wafting from her like expensive perfume. "You're the whistleblower," the woman said without preamble. "The one who sank Whitmore's career." Ice clinked against glass as she took another sip. "He did that himself." The woman produced a business card, Dr. Elena Santos, Ethics and Science Institute. "We want you to teach a masterclass on recognizing predators in research programs." Below them, the river swallowed the last of the sunset. Meg's daughter sent the email with no subject line, just a scanned legal document. The highlighted section. Asterisk, bequeath remaining collection to the original whistleblower, including all digital correspondence between JW and university officials 2001 to 2003. Asterisk. Attached files included emails she'd never seen, Jake begging his advisor for leniency, complaining about "that meddling bitch" to the dean, even one desperate message to Meg in 2004, she was right about everything. She archived them unread. The masterclass went viral. Not for the content, but for the moment when a trembling grad student asked, "How do you live with being hated for telling the truth?" And she'd answered without thinking, "By outliving their version of you." Someone filmed it. The clip got 3 million views. The package arrived on a Wednesday, a small wooden box from Meg's daughter containing 3 items. The original Fish and Wildlife complaint form with her signature. A faded Polaroid of the tortoise. A sticky note, "He died peacefully. 28 years in captivity. Longer than anyone expected." She buried the box under a lemon tree in Mary's garden. At the next year's conference, Dr. Santos handed her a whiskey neat. "They're naming an award after you. The Uncomfortable Truth Prize." She laughed so hard she snorted. "Make the trophy a tortoise." Somewhere, a student was reading an ethics textbook with her quote in the introduction. Somewhere, a glass terrarium sat empty in a university storage room. And here she was, still standing, still speaking, still surprising herself. The lightness had become its own kind of gravity. The award ceremony was held in the same university where Jake had once taught. The irony tasted better than the champagne. As she adjusted the microphone, a flash of movement caught her eye, a gaunt figure slipping out the back door. The set of those shoulders was unmistakable after all these years. "Dr. Whitmore," she murmured into the mic, watching the door swing shut. How predictable. The audience tittered nervously, thinking it part of her speech. Meg's daughter sent a forensic accountant's report along with the next batch of documents. The highlighted figures showed Jake draining his retirement account to pay for something called Project Phoenix, a private breeding facility in Nevada. He was trying to recreate his old work, the accompanying note read. "Right down to the tortoises." She forwarded it to Fish and Wildlife with one addition, "Check permit status." The raid made local news. A grainy photo showed officers loading crates into a truck, Jake in handcuffs looking decades older than his years. The caption, "Repeat offender arrested for illegal wildlife trafficking." George texted her the mugshot with a single emoji, turtle. She made it her lock screen for a week. The prison letter arrived on cheap lined paper, the handwriting shaky but still achingly familiar. "You win. Always did. J." She burned it over her kitchen sink, watching the ashes swirl down the drain. The last ember sizzled out just as her phone buzzed, a text from the nature center. "New hatchling in the reptile wing. You should name her." Somewhere, a baby tortoise was taking her first clumsy steps. Somewhere, a man was finally facing consequences. And here she stood, at the podium, at the precipice, at peace. The lightness had teeth now. And it was smiling. The baby tortoise fit in the palm of her hand, its shell still soft at the edges. The Nature Center director beamed as children pressed against the glass. "We're calling her Second Chance," the director said. She reached into the enclosure, letting tiny claws scrape against her skin. "No. Call her Truth." Jake's parole hearing notice arrived the same week as her honorary doctorate. Meg's daughter had circled the date in red with a post-it, "Want to testify?" She RSVP'd no, but sent along Jake's old emails about the endangered species violations. The parole board cited them extensively in their denial. The prison chaplain called on a rainy Thursday. "He's asking for you." She watched raindrops chase each other down the window. "Tell him the tortoises are thriving." The line went quiet. "He says he's sorry." "Funny," she said, "so am I." At the book festival, a young woman with Meg's sharp chin waited in the signing line. When she finally reached the table, she placed a worn copy of Lessons on Karma next to a business card, Environmental Crimes Division, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. "Thank you," the girl said simply. She signed the title page with a new inscription, "For the next generation of whistleblowers." The obituary was 3 lines in the local paper. Jacob Michael Whitmore, 52. Survived by 1 daughter. No services. She planted a lemon tree over the ashes of his letters. When it bore fruit 3 years later, she made marmalade and sent jars to George, to Mary, to the Nature Center staff. No note. None needed. Somewhere, a tortoise was teaching children about resilience. Somewhere, a young investigator was reading old case files. And here she sat, in sunlight, in silence, in something almost like grace. The lightness had become laughter now. And it echoed. Part 15, The Legacy of Scars and Sunlight. The invitation to testify before Congress arrived on the same day the lemon tree first bloomed. The subject line read, * Federal Oversight of Academic Research Programs, Your Expertise Requested. * She traced the embossed seal with her thumb, the paper crisp against her skin. 20 years ago, she'd been the problem. Now they wanted her solutions. Mary's voice crackled through the phone when she called to tell her. Jesus, girl. They're gonna put your face on a stamp next. She laughed, but that night she dreamt of tortoises, dozens of them, moving slow and sure through the desert, leaving trails in the sand that spelled out words she couldn't quite read. The hearing room smelled of polished wood and nervous sweat. As she took her seat, the committee chair leaned into his microphone. Dr. Whitmore's case study remains one of our most egregious examples of institutional failure. We're honored to have the woman who exposed him here today. A murmur rippled through the crowd. She adjusted her notes, deliberately ignoring the way her hands wanted to shake. The problem wasn't one bad man, she began. It was every person who looked the other way. C-SPAN ran the clip on loop for days. Meg's daughter, no, Lena now, she'd insisted on that, sent a photo from the Wildlife Crime Symposium where she was presenting. The slide visible over her shoulder showed Jake's original violation notices next to current trafficking statistics. The caption read, * like mother, like daughter. Kidding. We're nothing alike. She framed it next to the first tortoise photo. The Nature Center's gala was black tie, the reptile wing transformed with twinkling lights. When the director handed her the microphone to announce the new conservation fund, she saw Lena in the back, arm in arm with George's youngest daughter, both grinning, both wearing I Heart Suit Reptiles pins. This isn't an ending, she told the crowd. It's what happens after the ending. Later, as the band played, she slipped outside where the stars were bright and the cicadas louder than the music. The desert air smelled like rain and creosote. Somewhere out there, wild tortoises were digging burrows, living lives untouched by human folly. The final letter came via certified mail. Jake's prison journal, willed to her by default since Lena refused it. The last entry read. * I thought it was about the animals. It was never about the animals. She donated it to the university archives unread. Let some grad student mine it for a thesis about ego and ethics. She had lemon trees to tend, speeches to give, a goddaughter, George's idea, but she'd cried when he asked, to spoil rotten. Somewhere, a tortoise was teaching a child about consequences. Somewhere, a law was being written because she'd spoken up. And here she stood, not healed, not whole, but finally free of the weight she'd carried for so long. The lightness wasn't laughter anymore. It was simply life. And it was enough. The congressional subpoena arrived in a stiff blue envelope, the kind that crackles when opened. Not for her, for the university regents. She ran her thumb over the embossed letterhead, remembering how Jake used to mock government paperwork. "They're finally auditing the biology department," Lena texted. "Guess who's still listed as adjunct faculty in their system?" The attached screenshot showed Jake's name still lingering in the payroll database 20 years after his dismissal. A ghost in the machine. She forwarded it to the committee chair with 2 words: "Start digging." The archival footage surprised her most. There, in a 2003 news clip about the EPA grant scandal, was a younger Jake defiantly telling reporters, "Real science doesn't bow to bureaucracy." The camera had panned to show her in the background, unknowing then, just a blurred figure carrying specimen tanks out of his lab. Now the documentary crew wanted an interview about that exact moment. "What were you thinking right then?" the producer asked. She studied her younger self on the monitor. "I was counting how many animals we could save before the locks changed." Lena's wedding invitation came with a tortoise-shaped RSVP card. The venue? The Nature Center, of course. "You're walking me down the aisle," the note read. "Unless you'd rather officiate?" She bought a new suit for the occasion, emerald green, to match the tortoise exhibit placards. The university president resigned quietly after the audit revealed systemic oversight failures. The press release credited her memoir with inspiring the investigation. That night, she dreamt of the desert again. This time, the tortoise's trail spelled something clear. Keep going. At the wedding reception, George's daughter, her godchild now, tugged at her sleeve. "Auntie, come see." The Nature Center's newest resident stretched in its enclosure, a rehabilitated monitor lizard, its scales gleaming under the party lights. The plaque bore Lena's name and a date, the day she'd passed the bar exam. "We're calling it poetic justice," the director whispered. Somewhere, a law student was reading congressional testimony. Somewhere, a lizard basked in stolen sunlight. And here she stood, between generations, between past and future, between what was and what could be. The lightness had become a compass now. And it pointed only forward. The archaeology team from the university called about the discovery beneath Jake's old rental house. They'd found bones, not human, not even all from the same species. A jumbled grave of small skeletons beneath the floorboards where his breeding racks once stood. "We thought you should know," the lead researcher said. "There's tags on some. Dates match your whistleblower photos." She hung up and poured 3 fingers of bourbon. Drank one. Poured the rest over the lemon tree's roots. Lena texted crime scene photos from her first big case, a reptile smuggler operating out of an abandoned pet store. The chalk outline around a terrarium looked eerily familiar. "History doesn't repeat," she wrote back. "But it sure as hell rhymes." Her phone buzzed immediately. "I got him 20 years. You like my closing argument?" Attached was a transcript with one line highlighted. The defendant, like too many before him, believed the rules of science didn't apply to his ambition. She framed it next to the congressional subpoena. The documentary aired on a Tuesday night. There she was, older now, streaks of gray in her hair, standing in the reptile wing as children pressed against the glass behind her. "Every generation gets the heroes it deserves," she told the camera. "Mine got whistleblowers. These kids get tortoises." The shot held on Second Chance, now full-grown, methodically demolishing a strawberry. At the alumni reunion, a nervous grad student approached her near the punch bowl. "Dr. Whitmore's old lab notes, they're still cited sometimes. Should we?" She handed the kid a napkin to sop up their spilled drink. "Burn them. Cite me instead." Later, she found the same student deep in conversation with Lena near the fossil exhibits. The kid was nodding eagerly while Lena gestured with a champagne flute. Somewhere, a new generation was learning the old lessons. Somewhere, bones were finally being laid to rest. And here she stood, between the past and whatever came next. The lightness had become a torch now. And she was still passing it on. The university president's email subject line read, Whitmore Collection, Final Disposition. The attached photos showed workers hauling boxes from the archives, Jake's research, his notes, every last scrap of his legacy being loaded into a shredding truck. We're renaming the scholarship, the president wrote. The Second Chance Fellowship for Ethics and Science. She replied with one sentence, make the logo a tortoise. Lena's baby announcement arrived in a small box containing 2 items. A sonogram photo. A tiny onesie printed with future whistleblower. She cried for 20 minutes before calling. You can't saddle a kid with that legacy. Watch me, Lena laughed. Besides, she'll have the best auntie in the world to teach her balance. The invitation to deliver the commencement address came with a peculiar request, keep it under 15 minutes. The tortoise exhibit is the real draw for families. She wrote her speech sitting beside Second Chance's enclosure, the aged tortoise watching with what the keeper swore was recognition. When I was your age, she told the graduates, I thought changing the world required grand gestures. Turns out it just takes stubborn persistence, and knowing when to report illegal reptiles. The laughter lasted longer than the applause. The archival footage surfaced unexpectedly, a VHS tape labeled Whitmore Lab Backup. There, amid hours of tedious research logs, was a single revealing clip, Jake, unaware the camera was running, tenderly adjusting a heat lamp for the very tortoise that would undo him. There you go, old man, his younger self murmured. Nice and warm. She burned the tape without watching further. Some truths didn't need preserving. At Lena's baby shower, George's daughter, now a wildlife biologist, presented the expecting mother with an unusual gift, a framed collection of every news article about Jake's downfall. For the nursery wall, she deadpanned. Bedtime stories with morals. The room erupted in laughter. She caught Lena's eye across the party, a silent understanding passing between them. Somewhere, a tortoise was teaching another child about resilience. Somewhere, a new life was about to begin. And here she sat, surrounded by laughter, by legacy, by the living proof that time could heal without erasing. The lightness had become a gift now. And she was still unwrapping it. The university greenhouse smelled of damp earth and possibility when she arrived for the dedication ceremony. The newly installed plaque read, Second Chance Conservatory, where broken things grow. Beneath it, someone had already placed a tiny ceramic tortoise. Lena, now visibly pregnant, nudged her toward the microphone. Tell them about the lemon tree, she whispered. She cleared her throat. When you plant something over ruins, it doesn't erase them. The roots grow around what came before. A first-year biology student would later confess to crying during the speech. The box of Jake's personal effects arrived unannounced, sent by the prison after being unclaimed for a year. Inside, a wedding band, Meg's, not his. A brittle copy of On the Origin of Species with her old margin notes still visible. One sun-bleached tortoise skewed in a Ziploc bag. She buried it all beneath the lemon tree without ceremony. When the wind chimes stirred, it almost sounded like laughter. Lena's daughter was born on a stormy April night. The baby's first visitor, after parents and medical staff, was George's daughter, who smuggled in a stuffed tortoise from the Nature Center gift shop. Meet your auntie, Lena said weakly, nodding to where she stood frozen in the doorway. The baby grasped her finger with surprising strength. The documentary filmmakers returned, this time for Lena. Their angle, Whistleblower's daughters, the next generation of watchdogs. She watched from the sidelines as Lena effortlessly explained environmental law to the camera, her sleeping daughter strapped to her chest in a sling printed with tiny tortoises. We don't erase history, Lena said firmly. We just make sure it doesn't repeat. The director later confessed they'd gotten chills. At the Nature Center's 25th anniversary, Second Chance passed peacefully in her sleep. The memorial was simple, a new enclosure where children could touch replica tortoise shells, each engraved with a single word. Courage. Truth. Perseverance. She ran her fingers over the last one before the crowd arrived, remembering how heavy the original had felt in her palms all those years ago. Somewhere, a baby was learning her first words. Somewhere, a lemon tree was dropping its fruit. And here she stood, between what was lost and what was found. The lightness had become a seed now. And it was still growing. The morning of her 65th birthday, she found Lena's daughter, now a fierce-eyed 5-year-old named Sam, methodically reorganizing the tortoise memorial's replica shells. "This one goes first," Sam declared, placing truth at the head of the line. "Then the brave one. Then the sticky one." "Sticky?" Sam nodded solemnly. "Like when you touch a lemon and it stays on your fingers after." She laughed so hard her ribs ached. The university archives called with an odd request. They wanted her grocery lists. For the Whitmore collection exhibit, the earnest young archivist explained. To show the ordinary life behind the extraordinary actions. She donated one item instead, the cracked margarita glass from that long-ago lunch with Lily. The display label read, "How History Gets Made Over Drinks." Sam's first-grade teacher sent home a drawing that now hangs in her study, a stick-figure woman standing between a giant tortoise and a smiling sun. The caption, in wobbly letters. "My aunt sapped the turtles and my mom saves the law and I will save something too." She keeps it next to the congressional subpoena. The nightmares stopped years ago, but sometimes she still dreams of the desert. Now the tortoises move in formation, their shells forming words that change as she walks past. Let go becomes hold on becomes go on. She wakes smiling more often than not. At Sam's 10th birthday party, held at the Nature Center, the children play pin the tail on the tortoise while the adults sip lemonade made from her tree. Lena, now a federal judge, leans over the railing of Second Chance 2's enclosure. "Remember when you thought this story was about revenge?" She watches Sam explain proper tortoise etiquette to a wide-eyed classmate. "Turns out I didn't know the difference between endings and beginnings." The sunlight through the greenhouse glass paints them all in dappled gold. Somewhere, a researcher is citing her ethics paper. Somewhere, a child is pressing their hand to a replica shell. And here she stands, in the light, in the laughter, in the endless unfolding of a story bigger than any one person. The weight is gone. The lightness remains. And it is enough.